Hello and welcome to the Change Gang podcast with me, your host, Laura Ordile. I'm here to help you hold on to your sanity and your soul as you move through big change. I'm here to guide you from frustration to flow in your life, bridging the practical and the woo, just for you. Let's go. All right, welcome to the week, Change Gang, and I have one of my new favorite people back with me today, and it's Amy Cinnamon, and she is with U2U Coaching, and she works a lot with people with confidence and anxiety and getting them into a place that really allows them to move through life in the way that they want to. And I think that's such a gift and such a wonderful thing to do, because so often, so many of us get stuck by just thinking we can't do it, or we're not good enough, or who am I to think I can go out and do this or do that. And people have actually come up with what they like to term imposter syndrome, because that's what we're told out there that it's supposed to be like, that, oh, who are you to think that you can do this, or who are you? And you get challenged, and therefore you get beat down a little bit. And she helps people come back from that into a place of knowing that they can stand strong and do well and move into the world in a way that offers the things that they have to offer in the world. And I think that's wonderful and amazing. So welcome, Amy. Welcome. I'm glad you're back with me. Thank you.
Yes, I'm glad to be back. Thank you for having me.
Yes. So if you had a chance to listen to the last episode with Amy, we dug deep into some amazing things with confidence and with future pacing and with all the different things. And she even spoke about how she struggled with that very same thing, with anxiety over some public speaking. And that was one of the reasons she kind of dug into what she dug into with working with the subconscious. So I wanted to talk with her a little bit more today about the process of the subconscious, because oftentimes I forget that people out there don't know that the subconscious is a thing, and that it's running the show, and that we need to kind of be in concert with the subconscious to really get through the changes that we want to get through in life. And that oftentimes our subconscious, well, not often, always our subconscious is working to protect us, to keep us safe, and actually to keep us happy. And it's hard to notice that sometimes when you're in the middle of trying to quit something maybe that's not good for you, or trying to change a direction that you feel is really not fitting anymore. And it's hard to understand, why would my subconscious keep me on that path? Right? Do you see that with people?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, first of all, you're definitely right when you say that people don't realize that it's, a part of the mind that they can actually have control over. When you explain the unconscious to people, or the subconscious, as you put it, they, see it as just this part of the mind that, runs their their body temperature, keeps the blood flowing around the body, that part of them that they don't have to think about. And it's when you have that conversation with people and you ask them about, a time when they've learned something, and what was it like when they first learned how to, whether it was do a maths equation, or whether it was the first time they learned to do, cut somebody's hair. I had this recently with a client who was a hairdresser, and she had this real fear of, that she wasn't good enough, and that she couldn't do this thing that she wanted to go and do now, because, she just didn't have the skills and she wasn't clever enough. And I often find this a lot, especially from working in schools. It was that I can't do that. I don't know how to do it, which means I can't do it. I think at some stage in life, or depending on who's around us, I should say, but I think at some stage of life, some people get to a point where they think that learning's over for them, that they've got to this comfortable position, they know enough to keep themselves safe and comfortable where they are, so there's no point in learning anything else. So we get out of this habit of learning stuff, and we just think that if we don't know it, we don't know it, and if we're not good at it, we're not good at it. It's a very fixated mindset. You often hear grown-ups especially refer to kids being, oh, well, they just haven't got it in them. They're just not naturally talented. You
Oh,
know,
that's oh,
yeah, or if somebody is good at something, they'll say they are just naturally talented at it. But what they probably don't see is the hard work and effort that is actually going on behind the scenes for those people. And when you kind of bring out this idea into the forefront of this, I can't do this, I can't, I can't progress, I can't be better, it's often because people are comparing themselves to somebody who is doing it already, who's doing it naturally
true,
and fluently, you know,
true.
and so people kind of get stuck because they think, well, I'm just not good at it and I can't learn anything. So you really have to bring them back to the learning process, which happens very consciously to begin with. So it's a very clunky learning process, just like when you first learned to drive a car. It was, left indicator down, clutch in, first gear, and look out the way. It was a very broken down sequence. Now, most people, after they've been driving for a while, couldn't tell you how they drive. They're just like, oh, yeah, you just do this. So.
That's true. That's right.
Yeah, and all that's happened is that it's become an unconscious process. We're not having to think about it anymore. However, we actually do start off on a very conscious level before the information goes into the unconscious level. Just like when you were a baby, you had to learn how to crawl first, then you had to learn to walk. And even that was a clunky, difficult process, an uncomfortable process. And then you get to a point where you just don't think about it at all. And that sometimes for me is the easiest way to explain to somebody the unconscious part of their mind, of what it's actually doing. So it's running all of these learned processes behind the scenes so that you don't have to think about it anymore. Now, if you want to learn something new, you have to go through the uncomfortableness, if that's a word. You have to, I heard Lisa Nicholson say once, you have to be comfortable being uncomfortable. I think it was her anyway. And she's just right. And I say that a lot now. You have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable if you want to make a change happen. If you're really serious about making a change, you have to get uncomfortable, because you cannot make any change. You cannot learn something without feeling uncomfortable, without making an error, or without failing. And that's always the biggest fear for any change, is that people fear they're going to make a mistake. They fear that they're not going to be good enough. But that's just part of the process. You have to go through it. So
Right.
once you go through the process, and you've done it a couple of times, just, whether it's playing the recorder, I don't know why that came into my head, but I remember learning to play the recorder when I was in primary school, and it was awful. It was just, the sound was just terrible, and I absolutely hated it. It was kind of compulsory in my primary school to do recorder lessons, and we had to do them for about a year. But by about 3 weeks in, I actually could play a tune. I don't know whether it was like The Little Rainbow or Twinkle Twinkle Little Star or something like that, but I could actually play a tune, and I could still do it now. I can still play the tune. And it's just something that I did on repeat every week for a period of time that I felt uncomfortable doing, and then I got comfortable doing it. And it just became an unconscious process. So it's the same with habits. Whatever
Right.
habit that we have that is just on repeat, it's an unconscious process. So one of the things that I explain to people is that if we imagine, the mind, we have 10% of the mind, which is typically our conscious, logical, rational thinking mind. And then the rest of it is the unconscious mind. And that is the part that is running all of the processes within the body, how we feel, what we what we think about how we feel, all of that stuff, all of our memories, every experience that we've had is stored in that huge part of the mind. It's like the hard drive of the computer, and the conscious mind is simply just the files that we might add in that day, the information that we're taking in, and what we think about the information that we take in for that moment. But then once it's gone into the unconscious, it's kind of, well, this is the mistake where we then think it's out of our control, because we often try and make changes to the unconscious with our willpower. And as you said before, when we have a habit or a behavior that we want to change and we just do it through sheer willpower, then those sort of ideas that we want to change are often depleted throughout the day, because our willpower depletes, basically because our energy is getting lower and lower throughout the day. Now, if you think about when we want to change a specific behavior, so for example, I had a lady that wanted to stop drinking wine. Every Friday night, she would have a bottle of wine, and all she wanted to do was to have a glass of wine instead. But one of the fears that she had was actually that her friends wouldn't like her anymore, that she wouldn't be the life and soul of the party, that people would think she was boring. So all of her fears were very sort of external to who she actually was. And just getting her to focus on why she was doing it and why it's important to her, and actually getting her whole system thinking about that was the thing that made the change happen for her really easily. Does that make sense?
Oh, absolutely. And I think something that some people might not understand about the subconscious is a little bit about what you're saying right there, is that, you know, the person you were working with, she had a good feeling from being out and being with her friends and having the wine and all of those. And the subconscious clocks that. It knows that. And so it says, oh, that feels good. Let's do that. You're happy with that. You're happy with that. And so it anchors that in, you know, attaches it to ourselves, and then it continues running. Okay, we got that. Let's keep going. But the thing is that when we're ready to change that, and you go in and you're like, okay, I'm ready to change that, it's still running on that same track because it's already clocked it. It's got it in there. It's attached to, you know, us. No, that makes you happy. Let's keep going. Let's keep going. But now you're at the point where it doesn't feel good. It's not healthy for me. I need to change it. And yet the subconscious is on that track. And so the thing that we have to do is we have to go in and say, I want to change this. Well, you're trying to do it at that conscious level. The subconscious is going, no, we don't want to change that. You're not going to be happy then. And we know that this makes you happy. Right. And so it's an interesting thing that our subconscious is always trying to do positive things for us. It's always trying to keep us happy. And if we're trying to make changes without interacting with the subconscious, we're not letting it know, hey, we want to change this because that no longer makes us happy. We want to do this. And once it knows that, then it can start making the adjustments. It can start going, oh, okay, let's see how to fix that. Let's see, you know, what to do there. But if you're just trying to change it, it's going to resist, like the rubber band that just keeps pulling you back in another direction, because it's like, no, we have to keep you happy. We don't want change. We don't want that.
Yeah, or, exactly. You know, it's either moving you towards pleasure or away from pain, right? And so the pain for that lady with the wine was that she wasn't going to be accepted by her friend, even though she's a grown-up. People think that, you know, like when you're a grown-up, these things don't matter, but you'd be surprised how often it comes up with people that they don't want to make the changes because the people around them might not accept them anymore, because they're changing part of their identity. They're changing who they are as a person, and for the health benefits and whatnot. But there's this fear of not being accepted socially. And I am surprised when it does come up sometimes, because I think, well, you know, we're not kids anymore. You know, we should be able to put ourselves as a priority. But so often we just don't, because that social acceptance is something that is within us on a deep, deep level within our unconscious, which, you know, if you're part of a tribe, if you're part of a group, that means survival. That means life for your unconscious. So it's a really sort of deep part of us that is not just connected to us as an individual, but, you know, universally as well, you know, on that level of being part of something that is just bigger than us. We often think we want these changes for ourselves, and we come up with these barriers because of the unconscious programs that we're running. And a lot of the times, those programs that are running aren't even ours. You know, they're beliefs that have been instilled from previous generations, you know, how something was done by your mum's mum, or, you know, your granddad's grandfather, and, you know, well, we've always done it like this, so we'll just keep doing it. I mean, I had a conversation with a guy who was in his late 60s. It was the last time we were putting in for our election for our Prime Minister. And he asked me who I was voting for. Or it was for the party elections it was for. And he'd asked me who I was voting for. And I told him who I was voting for. And then he told me who he was voting for. And I said, all right. I said, so why are you voting for them? And he went, well, because you just vote for who your parents vote for, don't you? And I thought, well, I didn't say, and I just went, all right. And I thought, no, because who your parent voted for isn't even alive for a start, you know, and it's totally different now. And yeah, that's just always been a good little reminder to me about how we'll just keep things going, can't even say the word, generationally, without even thinking about it. I know there's a couple of, yeah. Yeah.
That's too true. Yeah. And that's kind of part of the thing, that our subconscious does also love what's comfortable and what's been repeated. Repetition. Yeah. And I think that's where sometimes, you know, people think when they come to someone who deals with the subconscious, whether it's through hypnosis, NLP, all the different things, well, is it just one time and then we're done? Well, that can happen. Absolutely, that can happen. Mm-hmm. However, oftentimes there's reinforcement. You know, you had a lot of reinforcement to what's mm-hmm. going on now. So it's always good to have a little bit of reinforcement along the way to continue the repetition, which is why we talked so long to you about and went so deep with the conversation last time about really using the tools that are offered to anchor those things in and continue them. But our mind, you know, the more that you encourage the change through the subconscious, you know, if it does get off track a little bit because it's like, well, I don't know, it felt pretty good to be over there, you know, then you can kind of bring it back. And just like that woman with the wine, we do have outside influences that come in and can knock us back a little bit. Where you do go, I've actually had that happen where I've gone someplace and not been drinking, and they're like, "Oh no, have a drink, have this. What's mm-hmm. wrong? What's the matter? How come you're not?" You know, and then it's this. You feel like you have to defend yourself. You have to, you know, all that, and then it kind of comes into that little bit of fear factor again. Yeah, but if you have reinforcements, then it's able to go, "I'm good. I'm, you know, feeling good at the core," is the point that I think all of us that's where we try to get people and ourselves, is to feeling good no matter what's going on around.
Exactly. Yeah. Which is, for me, is where the coaching element comes in, of being able to help somebody get to a point where they can defend themselves without having to justify themselves. So absolutely. It's whatever decision they've made for themselves, to be comfortable with that decision instead of, but again, it's an unconscious process, isn't it, to sort of go with the majority. Well, if that person's doing it, it must be all right. But when we bring somebody out of that, when we dehypnotize them out of that kind of,
I love that.
Yeah, that idea of, well, you know, a bottle of wine's all right on a Friday night because everyone does it. You know, every advert that you see with any successful independent women on, there's always a glass of wine in the hand, or a movie, or you know, a TV series or anything. That there's always alcohol for the moment of stress. There's always alcohol for the moment of success and achievement. So it's kind of like we've been taught that it's an okay thing. And even if consciously you aren't aware that those messages are being delivered, your unconscious is soaking that up 24 hours, 24/7. It doesn't switch off. So you might not think that these decisions are being made for you, but actually when you kind of dive deep into the unconscious and kind of not so much about, I'm kind of being careful what I say here, because I don't want to, because I certainly don't go into hypnosis as a process to analyze things and to why we have this problem. That's not what I do. We might kind of look at it enough to get the information that we need to then be able to move forward to have the outcome that we want. But it's often where I find people will discover that a lot of the beliefs that they've been holding on to, that are making them feel stuck, that aren't allowing them to move forward, simply weren't theirs in the first place. And that they're carrying around someone else's shit, basically. They're carrying around other people's crap with them, whether it was from their parents or whether it's through media, whether that's social media or through movies that they've watched. And, you know, I had this young girl who had actually had this real fear about money, because there was a movie. I think it was kind of generalized in a lot of movies anyway, that anybody who had money was always the evil person, was always the baddie, the bad guy. And she felt she got a huge amount of money in inheritance money, and she felt like the worst person in the world for having all of this money, and she just wanted to get rid of it. And it was because of this belief that she had, which again wasn't even hers, that she'd just taken in, you know, through comments growing up, that money is the root of all evil, movies that she'd watched, and all of these little fragments of information had just created this belief for her that she couldn't have this money and that it was disgusting and she just needed to get rid of it. But actually it turned out to be something really positive for her, and she changed her life through the money, so it was really great in the end. But it was all based on something that wasn't even her idea in the first place. And I think when people understand that the unconscious isn't just about, you know, protective strategies that might have been put in place to protect them from that time when they got hurt off their ex-boyfriend who cheated on them, so then they find themselves 10 years later still not in a relationship because they still can't trust anybody. And yeah, that strategy might have worked for a short period of time, but actually by holding on to it, you know, can kind of ruin any chances of moving forward. And
it's not even a conscious holding on, you know, it's
exactly
a conscious thing, because they're like, I want to be in a relationship, I want to be, you know, feeling good, and it's not happening, and they don't know why. And the interesting thing is that when we are working with people, we don't always have to go back to the why. The subconscious knows why. And so when you're working with someone, you go in and you clear that for them, and it doesn't take, and this is nothing against any counselor or anything, but it doesn't take years and years and years of sitting down and finding the root, because the subconscious already knows the root and the reason and the why. And I love that part. I love that.
Yes. And exactly. I had a client who had been through psychotherapy around 3 or 4 times. And anyway, after doing a very short program with me, we basically found the root cause was the fact that when she was a baby, she was in her mum's arms and she was crying, wanting attention from her mum, but her mum was talking to somebody else. And in that split second, the unconscious felt she wasn't important. In that split second of that moment. And then just given that, you know, 3-month-old or whatever she was at the time, some new ideas, some new beliefs, some new information, it totally dramatically changed her whole self-image from that point moving forward. And and it's almost like we don't need to know the reason why on a conscious level,
right?
Because it never makes sense, and it'll never be a logical, rational reason as to why we do these behaviors, because the behaviors are completely irrational, right? And it's always like,
Right.
why am I behaving this way? Why am I like this? You know, I had a conversation with a guy he'd hypnotized somebody who had a massive fear of wasps. No, was it wasps? Oh my God, I've ruined the story, but it right. This guy told me his story about one of his clients, and I actually use this as an example for my own clients. He had a client who was petrified of post boxes. They would see it, you know, like we have the red Royal Mail post boxes in the UK, and whenever they would see a post box, they would like run to the other side of the road. They were absolutely petrified of them. And it turned out that when the child was around 3 or 4 years old, they were still at the bus stop with their mum and their auntie, and there was a big line of people at the bus stop. Nice sunny day, and then everybody started to panic. And this kid, you know, this 3-year-old was getting pulled around all over the place, didn't know what was going on. And all he remembers is this post box, this flash of a post box comes into his head. But actually, there's a wasp flying around all the grown-ups. So all the grown-ups are panicking about this wasp when this 3-year-old doesn't have a clue what is going on, sees the post box. So of course, the 3-year-old's man will be like, post box is scary. Everyone's panicking because of the post box. Get away from the post box. So then he has this fear that lives with him for the rest of his life till I think he was around 60-year-old when he went for hypnosis session to get rid of his fear of post boxes.
Oh
So
my goodness.
yeah, so the unconscious does not need a rational reason.
No.
It does not need to make sense. And when we go through processes where the outcome is to try and make sense of why we do stuff, I think that's when you can end up down a really deep, dark rabbit hole. When if the focus is on what you want to do instead and have that as the outcome, not only are you potentially discovering why you did that in the first place, that random rational behavior, but also you're reprogramming to something new. You're also getting a new outcome. Because if we have the focus on why am I doing this, you find out why, well, then what? Then you end up feeling bad about doing it in the first place. Then you end up feeling silly for coming up with that conclusion. And then you start doubting yourself even more. Not only that, but everything else in your life as well.
Yes, that's true. And it doesn't, the interesting thing is it's, you know, you've given some examples of things that kind of rooted way back when, but it can root, you know, something can happen. Like I literally just had something happen where I'm fine having conversations and speaking and doing all those things and, you know, putting myself out there and everything. But I was in a position recently where in a particular group, I had to, you know, speak in front of the group and everything and do the thing I was supposed to do. And I fumbled. I messed up. And I thought, okay, fine, you know, whatever. Well, it came my turn again. And again, I fumbled. I messed up. I didn't get what I needed out. So then the next time that I came up, I was almost in a state of panic and fear because all of a sudden now I had this thing where the subconscious goes, hey, we did this, that didn't go well. Hey, we did this. It was uncomfortable for you. We don't want you to have to do it again. So we're going to try and back you off of that. And that's where that fear and that panic comes in because it's a protection thing. And I had to go in and go, all right, we're not letting this go any further. And I use some of the NLP techniques and some of those things to go in for myself and go, yeah, let's clear this right now. I don't want that. Attached to me, anchored in or anything like that. And so it can happen anytime. And I just happened because I'm so ingrained in this and involved in it. I recognized what was happening. But for someone who's not, they're just going to know all of a sudden, I don't know, I used to be able to do this. It was fine. Now I have this weird irrational. I know people who have flown for years, all of a sudden have this, and they'll say, have this irrational fear of flying now because to them it doesn't seem irrational. You know, it doesn't seem rational. It doesn't seem right. I flew all these years Why can't I do it now? Well, something, maybe it was turbulence, maybe it was a bad experience on getting to the flight on time, or maybe something triggered in your subconscious to go, that was a bad experience. Let's not do that again. Let's not do that again.
Absolutely. And speaking of, I had a very similar situation with a client who I worked with last year. It was a teenage boy who was actually flying to the States to, I think it was like for a wrestling competition or something. And he's flown many times before. He's been to the States many times before. And he was really panicking about this up and coming flight that he had, to the point where he was going to cancel the trip. He didn't want to go. And after I didn't actually use hypnosis, I use integral eye movement therapy, which I know we've never talked about, but it is a really great, very effective therapeutic tool. And he had some really bad news on his last flight on the way back home from the States. He heard some really bad news about a family member. And he just didn't put the two and two together. But obviously the unconscious does, because whatever feeling state you're in at that time, whatever you're doing, it's going to anchor into that moment. Right. So when I work with young people, so I do a lot of work with children who are disengaged from education, and I always want our time together positive, because the minute it becomes, so if I turn up and they're in a bad mood because they've had an argument with a parent, I'll cancel the session. I won't try and turn it around. I won't try and be like, oh, come on, we'll have a good time. I'll go, okay, I'll see you next week. Because I know that if they have any period of time with me that they're in a bad mood, I'll become associated with that bad mood. So I'm quickly out of there. I'll be like, I'll see you next week. And I explain this to them, and I explain this to their parents as well, so that they understand what I'm doing, and also to give them the insight of how powerful a feeling state is, and that it can anchor itself to a person, to a thing, a smell, a texture, like anything can become an anchor. And that negative feeling state that he had as he was getting onto the plane, well, part of your mind, as it's taken in all of the sensory information around you, it's thinking, what's the problem? What is the problem? It must be this. That it's argued in situations with hay fever. You often find that when people have really bad hay fever issues, allergic to like the pollen and the grass and stuff like that, is because they've had a bad experience in the summertime. My husband, terrible hay fever, won't let me work on him, of course, has terrible hay fever. And when we discussed it, he'd never had hay fever till he was about 13. And all of a sudden, he had hay fever. And the game-changing moment was he fell off a roof and broke his arm.
So interesting. That's fascinating. I've never heard that. I'm going to keep that one in mind. That's cool.
There's a young girl as well who never had hay fever in their life, and then found out that their best friend sadly died in an accident. Hay fever.
Oh my goodness.
And the immune response to a threat, that severe feeling of, panic, fear setting in, well, your unconscious is zoning out on what's around you. Where's the threat? What is it? Where's that saber-toothed tiger? Because, it's that reptilian brain is fired up. Where's the threat? Who's going to eat us? Who's going to kill us? But they're getting the smell of the pollen. Or this is how people can have particular reactions to particular flowers. For some people, it might, there might be a bunch of hyacinths in the room when they get some really bad news, and all of a sudden they're allergic to that. Sometimes it can be a specific perfume. If you think that olfactory sense is the strongest one that is connected to our, all of our information of memories and things like that, it's a really potent one. So I know I've just gone off down a rabbit hole, but hey, there you go.
Well, and so one of the things with that that I want to be sure to mention and talk about, we talk about the the emotion state and the things like that. And one of the things, and I think you even talked about this in a video I saw you do at one point, that I thought was like, that's right, and that's really good, and a lot of people don't know that, is that when you're going in and you're helping someone to detach from something like that, or to clear that, or however you want to phrase it, dehypnotize them from something, you're not taking away, I'm not taking away the memory of the situation or learning from a situation, because we go through things sometimes that we're learning the process of life, all of that. We're taking away the difficult feeling state, the attachment that is there, so that the fear doesn't come, the anxiety doesn't come, the anger that doesn't come. So it's a detachment of that emotional state that's happening. Oftentimes people go, "What? I don't want to, that was a big experience, or I needed to learn." You're also not taking away the reasonable fear of something or caution of something. So if you're helping someone with a fear of snakes or a fear of spiders, you're not going to say, now you're going to go play with a rattlesnake and be fine with it. You still have that caution there. You're just going, it's not that huge thing that makes your palms sweat or your breathing stop or your panic attack come in. There's a big difference in that. And I think that's an important thing to kind of dissociate.
It's like when we kind of disassociate from this thing that we've been so attached to that is creating this massive fear. I mean, take like spiders, for example, or as you said, snakes. Somebody who's petrified of spiders, you could just talk about a spider and they will have a full-on meltdown and get into this same panic state as if they would if they seen one for real. And it goes back to the idea of the brain doesn't know the difference between what's real and what's not real, right? So even if it's a real threat or just an imagined threat, it's going to respond the same. Most of the time, people who are focused on their fears are imagining their fears more than they're actually experiencing them. So for somebody who's afraid of snakes, will panic about going for a walk in case they come across a snake. People who are afraid of dogs won't go out for a walk around the park because they know there's going to be lots of dogs there. People who are afraid of wasps don't go out particular times of the summer because they know that that's the time when wasps come out. So rather than them actually experiencing it most of the time, they are just imagining it. So by taking away the focus on this imagined perceived threat, actually allows other stuff to come through. It's like this fear has become the lid on top of all of this other information that's going on in their life, like all of these wonderful experiences that they've been having with their friends, with their family, like all of these picnics that they've been on and never ever been bothered by a wasp and never actually even seen one. All of that is almost as if it's deleted because of this one time when this wasp came and stung them, or they just went into panic mode. So the moment we take that away, it actually allows this whole box to open up and to expand wider. And one of the ways that I tend to explain this to people is if they've had a fear that they've been living with for quite a while, or a memory of something that was particularly traumatic for them, whether an animal was involved or not, once we kind of go through the process, is we don't take away the memory, we don't delete it, but we update it. So we give them, because often people only have that perspective of that memory at that time when they were in it. Now it could be 10 years later, but every time they're triggered by a sight, a sound, or a smell that relates to that past memory, they respond like they did that day 10 years ago, rather than the person that they are now, who's 10 years older, 10 years wiser, and has a lot more information, rational information, than what they might have had at this point. So by moving them out of that position into this new one, it gives them a whole new perspective. And not only that, it actually allows them to take on board the lessons that they learned from that experience, so they can
Right.
keep the
Exactly.
lessons and then they can let the rest go. And then that just really allows people to be able to move forward in a safe way as well, as you said, so they're not putting themselves in danger thinking, hey, like I'm totally inoculated against snakes and
Right.
rattlesnakes.
No, and I don't want to do that, but what I do want to do for people, and I think what you want to do too, is that and what often happens is after you go through the process, after you help them through this situation and you have them go back and bring that memory up, it's a different, I can probably see that, but yeah, it doesn't bother me. I don't have the
Exactly.
feeling.
It's the question becomes, when you think of that memory, what's it like now, in this moment now, with this new information, with this new feeling, and often it's just taking that feeling, say from, let's say from like a 10 down to, it might only be a 7, and that's a massive change. Or it might be a starting point as a 7, it might come down to 0. Everybody's different into how much feeling they want and how much they let go. But actually, when it's at that 0, it's not about this, oh wow, I feel amazing, I feel great, I don't have that fear anymore. It's just, I feel okay. And that's the prize right there. If you can be in a state of mind where you just feel okay, you just feel comfortable, to me, like that is the ultimate success. So when I talk about confidence and self-image and self-esteem, it's not about, so that you can be the loudest person in the room. It's not so that you can show off. It's none of that, because confidence sometimes is misinterpreted in that way. But actually, it's just to feel confident in your own skin. It's just to feel confident, to be okay. Like, you don't have to feel great, because that's not sustainable anyway. Nobody is happy 100% of the time. It's a state that fluctuates in and out of our lives. And, I don't know about you, but most people who are happy all of the time are pretty annoying. So, it
doesn't feel real. It doesn't feel real.
Yeah, so. Exactly. But I just think to be okay is the goal, where we get sort of brainwashed, if you like, to think that we have to be striving all of the time. We have to have major success. But, to me, that is false goals. To me, having a goal and getting what you want are those things that just make you feel connected, that make you feel comfortable, that make you feel safe, that make you feel, where you can decide how you feel. That's the key. Being in a situation where you're okay enough to decide how you feel, so that you can actually, determine for yourself what your response is going to be. Because it doesn't matter how successful you are, how much money you earn, what role you do, none of that matters if you are so influenced by someone else or something around you, or the media or whatever, or social media. Then you're never going to be okay. You're always going to be relying on somebody else to fulfill you, someone else to validate you. But actually, if you're in that position where you decide how you respond, to me, that's the aim where I want to get my clients. Now, they might not initially want that when they come to me, but after we go through that coaching process, I find that that's where they get to. They stop the comparison of, as you mentioned before about the whole imposter syndrome, is often because we look at other people who are doing that thing we want to do and we think, well, I can't do that. I'll never get there. Look at me. When actually it's look at you now, and, even take a moment to turn and look back and see how far you've come, whether that was from last week or last year, and having that focus just on comparing you to you, because you can only compare yourself to yourself. If you start comparing to other people, then you're always going to be the whim of other people's behavior, other people's expectations.
You're always letting someone else choose your happiness at that point. And I am someone who wants to choose my own happiness. And I had to figure that out too, that I wasn't going to let anyone else decide if I got to be happy that day. That was my decision. And
exactly.
Yeah, an important place. That's an important place to be.
It
And
is, yeah. And how amazing to be in that place, when so many of us are constantly putting time, money, and effort into something else to make us happy, whether that's that bottle of wine on a Friday night, or whether it's, a new handbag or a pair of shoes or that job. It's if we can get somebody to a place where they can realize that they're the ones that determine how they feel at any given moment, regardless of what's going on around them, then to me that is job done. That's the pat on the back for me, if you like. That's the moment where I'll give myself a little round of applause. That's my achievement. And I think that's always the aim. So even whether it's, stuff I teach on social media, or whether it's in the workshops that I do, or whether it's with the client, that's always the aim, to give people the skills so that they can manage their whole mind, that they can have their unconscious and conscious mind working together rather than against each other. Because that's generally what happens, isn't it? When we decide we want to make a change, we end up in this battle with ourselves, because we have one part of the mind wanting one thing and the other part of the mind doing the other thing. When actually we're a whole system, right? It's like your right arm wanting to go one way and your left arm wanting to go the other. We have to work as a team together with ourselves. So having both sides of the brain working together, having both parts of us working in harmony. Yeah, that's always my aim.
Yeah, it is. Well, then that's the ultimate goal, is to give people, anyone that I'm working with, that you're working with, is to give them the absolute and ultimate power over their own lives and feelings, and to move into knowing that they are the power in their life. They are the ones that are in control and can do the things that they want. And it's all a matter of them choosing along the way what they want, and how they want to feel, and all those things. And that regardless of outside circumstances, you still make a choice all along the way. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Amy. Oh my gosh, I just love talking with you. It's so incredible, because you do bring up so much about what I think people really need to hear, and offer them insight into things that they might not understand otherwise. And I think it's important to understand these things, because, like you said, our subconscious is over 90% of what's running our lives. So if we're not in communication with something that's running over 90% of our life, we're maybe needing to have a little bit more of a chat with that connection.
Exactly. It's like you're in the passenger seat. When we aren't in the driver's seat, and we're trying to run entirely off our 10% brain, our logical thinking brain, it's like we're in the passenger seat or the back seat and giving directions and pointing to stuff that we want to go to, but we're just driving past. We're like, no, that way, I want to go that way, like the little kids do in the car. I want to go there, I want to go to that park. But the boss who's driving the car is just going on regardless of what you say, what you do. So you have to switch seats. No, not switch seats. You have to be in the driver's seat as well. So those two persons in the car, I've probably gone a bit metaphorical now, but those two persons in the car need to become one.
Communicate ahead of time about the direction that you want to go. So that you don't pass the exit that you wanted to go and say, well, didn't you know I wanted to go there? And it's like, no, this is the way we've always gone. I will compare it to like a husband and wife driving together sometimes. And it's like, no, I wanted to go that way. Let's communicate. So thank you so much. And I'm going to have you remind everyone, Amy, where they can find you and get in touch with you and chat with you, because I think you're amazing. And I know that there's people out there that are meant to work with you.
Thank you. Yes. So you can find me on my website, which is www.u2ucoaching.com. And that's the letter U, the number 2, the letter U for U2U coaching. And I'm also on social media, so you can find me on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And it's all just under my name, Amy Cinnamon, and that's cinnamon with a C and a D on the end. Like the spice, cinnamon with a D on the end.
There you go. Thank you.
I have to explain that.
Oh, I have to explain my name all the time because it's Ordile, but it looks like Ordile. And so people are always, I just explain it. So it's easier and quicker. Yeah. And we're all about easy and quick. We're all about easy and quick.
Yes.
So there you go, Change Gang. Thank you so much, Amy. And I look forward to chatting with you more sometime in the future and to following you because you always have really good information. And I love watching what you put out there. So thank you for that. Thank you for all the things that you share. It's really good.
Thank you.
So there we go. Off into the week. I hope you have a wonderful one, Change Gang. And I look forward to meeting you right here next week, same time. Ciao. I hope today's episode was interesting to you in some way and fun. If so, hey, find someone to share it with. Maybe they need to hear it too, or maybe they'll just enjoy it. If you'd like, go ahead and grab my tips on supercharging your success. It includes a free short meditation to do just that. You can find that at bit.ly/supercharge your success. Until next time, happy day.